Renee Reifenberg, Ashley Lowndes, and Hannah Sage present the issues of reproductive labor inequality. The following video observes the traditional heterosexual family consisting of a man, woman, and one or more children. It's important to first lay out our gender norms that create this reproductive labor inequality in the first place. In our society, there are acceptable gender scripts that we follow. In our everyday lives, people present certain characteristics that allow other people to assume the gender a person is trying to embody. This is called doing gender. For example, cues as simple as wearing certain types of clothing can be seen as doing gender, like men wearing jeans and women wearing skirts or dresses. In these face-to-face interactions, one is doing gender and the other is determining gender. The one determining gender will perceive the social cues and norms that have been learned to assume the other person's gender.
We are forced into the gender norms as early as birth. Babies that are born as intersex most oftentimes undergo reconstruction surgery based on the reproductive system that may already be present. For example, if the baby is born with the reproductive system of a woman with a slightly larger than normal phallus that would constitute a female, then doctors will perform surgery to make the phallus internal. So at birth, babies are being gendered even if the anatomy says different. It then continues into the sphere of education, where children as young as preschool age are being cornered into these gender norms. Many schools and teachers find that teaching children to behave like young ladies and young gentlemen becomes a vital part of the standard curriculum. Boys are allowed to be loud and destructive, while girls are reprimanded for their behavior. Different, less disruptive activities are always suggested to girls, furthering this concept of doing gender that will carry on until adulthood.
When we get to adulthood, doing gender is shown in marriage and childbearing. This is where the problem of reproductive labor inequality comes in. Once a woman becomes a parent, there are a range of disparities that follow, like wage. Another disparity is the working father works and does less childcare than their wives. This is reproduced over and over again through interacting with others who are doing gender in the same way. The ideology of intensive mothering advises mothers to spend a tremendous amount of time, energy, and money in raising their children, which gives them less time and energy to work at the same time. Men do not feel this urging responsibility of having to physically be with the children all the time, like most mothers do, or have the same psychological involvement. An issue many working mothers face is the guilt for leaving their child to go to work.
On that first day of health class.
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die. Don't have sex in the missionary position. Don't have sex standing up. Just don't do it. Promise? Okay, everybody take some rubbers.
The first part of the solution to this reproductive labor inequality would be to have more comprehensive and inclusive sex education. Current sex education contains the sexual double standard even if it's not explicit. Girls and women should not desire or have sex and therefore should be gatekeepers, while boys and men should seek sex at all times. Sex education right now is abstinence-only sex education, which is detrimental to young men and women. Girls do not learn about access to birth control, the options available for unintended pregnancy, and how to properly parent. The same is said for boys. While in some sex education condom use is taught, the other preventative ways of pregnancy are not. Teenage sexuality needs to be normalized. Self-determination and self-regulation need to belong in the hands of teens.
The second part to the solution would be allowing parental leave for both the mother and the father that are the same length. Because this concept of breadwinning is always associated with men, they feel they are not doing their gender correctly if they are not the ones bringing home the majority of the income. But allowing parental leave for both parents affects the dynamics of both the family and the men positively when returning to work. Once both parents return to work, when they are at home with the child, they are more likely to share their responsibilities. Once men return back to work, they work better with others, show better appreciation for stay-at-home moms, which lowers the gender disparity in the workplace, and all around hold family values more sacred to them, like having and allowing flexible work schedules. Fathers need to be able to stay at home for the same amount of time as the mother to help the family dynamic, but also their work dynamic.
And the final part of the solution is to shift the norm that women are the main caretakers of children. Both mothers and fathers should be equally involved when it comes to raising a child and working to provide an income for the family. Both stay at home mothers and stay at home fathers should be socially acceptable. Because women being intensive mothers is a part of correctly doing their gender, it is expected that men are not required to put as much effort into childcare. But in some cultures, men show a stronger desire to help with children. For example, in the Jarai community, men will go so far as to stimulate breastfeeding to comfort children. They believe because men and women are seen to be more equal in terms of labor, it is not uncommon for men to help with childcare. While it's not necessary to go so far as to stimulate breastfeeding, this is an effective example of how the norm of child rearing can be placed on both mothers and fathers, not just the mothers.
Reproductive labor inequality stems from our earlier explanation of doing gender. Because men and women are supposed to follow the socially constructed norms set for their respective genders, the gap of inequality increases with every instance of appropriate gender presentation. Gender norms need to shift to a more balanced view of how men and women should be equally involved in parenting and to take the pressure solely off women so that this issue of reproductive labor inequality becomes non existent.